Hey guys, welcome to Boxing Squad for boxing news and views from around the internet. Heavyweight contender Dillian White has announced his ring return for December the 7th. So presumably, even though he hasn't said it, that can only be on the Ruiz-Joshua rematch undercard in Saudi Arabia. So his exact statement, and see here on screen, this is from his Instagram. He says, "The Mohawk is back, baby. Let's go. Let's get the milk. Next fight. Hashtag December 7th. Number one, baby. Hashtag TBS. Hashtag number one." So Dillian White announcing his return December 7th. And we'll come to thoughts on a potential opponent in a bit. But first, let's talk about this because under normal circumstances, Dillian White would be in the Dillian White pay-per-view business. He wouldn't be returning or featuring on anyone's undercard, but it's not normal circumstances because in recent months, as we know, there has been a scandal of performance-enhancing drugs that around White, that there was an allegation he failed a drug test ahead of his fight with Oscar Rivas, that Rivas never knew, that he was cleared to fight just on the day of the fight. He beats Rivas, and the scandal sort of erupts when news is leaked in the days after the fight. So UCAD is running a process at the moment to go through the whole situation, and who knows when that will actually come to a conclusion. There had been some optimism from Dillian White and also Eddie Hearn that it was going to end in October, but now we're deep into November, so who knows what will happen, and things never seem to go as quickly as they might with UCAD. Sometimes these sorts of cases can take anywhere from 18 months to 2 years or longer, but until there's some sort of resolution, don't expect to see Dillian White in a pay-per-view. He has talked about a potential rematch with Joseph Parker, but that was never going to be next. It was never going to be in December. That's for more down the track. But they're not going to launch Dillian White into any sort of headlining pay-per-view event until he's got the whole UCAD situation squared away. And presumably that it lands in his favour, that he's cleared on whatever ends up happening. We'll have to see. We can't comment too much on that because we just don't know where things are at and what's happening at all the detail. But what we do know is Dillian White is going to be on an undercard, and that looks to be the 5th heavyweight fight of the Ruiz Jr. and Joshua rematch in Saudi Arabia. So yes, there will be, if White joins the card, 5 heavyweight fights on that card. The main event, obviously, then there's the co-main event, which is Alexander Povetkin and Michael Hunter. You also have Tom Little versus Majidov, and you also have Filip Hrgović taking on Eric Molina. So it really is going to be a heavyweight buff's dream sort of card. 5 different heavyweight fights on that card, so by the look of it. So we'll have to see what happens with White here, an official announcement and who the opponent is going to be. And there has been some chat from Eddie Hearn that he would likely return against a top 30 type of opponent. Sometimes with Eddie Hearn, those sort of top 30 type statements can end up being a top 50 or a top 70 type of fighter, and he just sort of slightly improves the outlook for what it is, and then you end up seeing who it is and you're like, okay, then definitely not a top 30. And I know there has been some chatter that Dillian White was going to be facing Charles Martin potentially, and that was potentially going to be in the United States in that Jacobs card. But who knows what will happen. But at 2.5 weeks notice or so, it's more likely to be someone that is used to being brought in at short notice. Now, a guy that has put his hand up, and see here on screen, is Joey DeWaco. So Joey DeWaco, who has a record of 20 wins, 7 losses and 4 draws, 29 years old, out of the United States. He has been featured on a number of Matchroom cards recently, and he was meant to have a fight with Murat Gassiev recently. Gassiev just pulled out injured twice. That's happened this year for Gassiev and DeWaco. So DeWaco has had a couple of fights, one recently against Rodney Hernandez, but he's put his hand up and said, let's get this deal done. And if White was to face him, I think people would say that White would go in there, get the job done. Maybe not necessarily a knockout because DeWaco is tough, but there is a downside to a fight with a guy like Joey DeWaco because he does have the potential to make the fight a bit of a stinker. So he can be in some fights where the other guy might win most of the rounds, but not necessarily look all that good. And I guess it would be a statement if White fought DeWaco and he got a knockout, but I wouldn't be predicting it. And DeWaco, some of the recent guys like Rodney Hernandez, Sergey Kuzmin, Andrei Fedosov, Bryant Jennings that he's fought, all decisions, either, losses or, in the case of the Hernandez win, a decision to Joey DeWaco. So I could see that working in terms of if White wants the activity in the rounds and probably not getting a stoppage, but in terms of if he wants to go in there, look good, get a quick stoppage and just a little bit of activity, DeWaco maybe not the play, but we'll see what happens here. I mean, Charles Martin, if they added that fight to that card, that's a pretty decent fight for Dillian Whyte, and especially at just a few weeks' notice. So maybe that's why it wouldn't happen, because Charles Martin is really a top 30 guy, whereas Joey DeWaco is more the sort of top 50, top 60 sort of guy. He's more used to being brought in at short notice. Other names, well, it's sort of hard to speculate. We don't really know who's available and who they've been chatting to. But yeah, I'm not expecting anyone fantastic at a couple of weeks' notice. And it's the sort of fight where it appears more to be activity. Let's take a lower risk fight for Dillian White, get him some activity, and then on to the next one. And the next one could be a potential clash with Joseph Parker. White's indicated this week he wouldn't mind having a rematch with Joseph Parker. He said anywhere, anytime. And in other posts, he said he'd knock him out, all that sort of thing. But some of that also, as I alluded to earlier, would be dependent on him clearing this UCAD situation. They don't want to risk having a lower than expected pay-per-view yield because of the ongoing situation. And this is why he's on this undercard, or he is going to be on an undercard coming up soon, just because of, the uncertainty regarding his career. They want to monetize him, make the most of it, give him the paychecks that he wants, because Dillian Whyte is in the Dillian Whyte pay-per-view business. He has prioritized money fights in his career as opposed to sometimes taking on eliminators, which would have paid him less. So I'm sure he won't be too happy that he'd have to fight on an undercard, because let's face it, he will take a haircut if he joins the undercard, a significant one. And I have seen some chatter around immediately after this sort of suggesting, well, the reason that Sky and Matchroom increased the undercard to 25 pounds is because they may have to cater for someone like White. No, I don't think that's it at all, because White wouldn't be getting great money for a tune-up fight. I think it's more that they would just want to make as much money as possible. It's one of the biggest fights of the year, one of the biggest fights in recent memory. And you have to remember that if Anthony Joshua wins, maybe this will be his new pay-per-view price. But also, if he loses, well, then Sky and that have clipped the ticket and got as much money as possible while they can. But Dillian Whyte returning December 7th. What do you make of it? Drop a comment, loud and often. Hit like, hit subscribe, follow me on Twitter, boxing_squared. I'm out.